This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, welcome everyone. First off, empty agenda. Anyone have anything administrative that they want to mention right now?
I think we had a couple discussions on an off email, right, regarding the README. I don't know if that was considered administrative. And we had a discussion on sort of some kind of like onboarding guide and quick start guide. Um,
Hmm. Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
yeah,
Um, so I sent the email. I think Dan, you might have a reply to it. I don't know if
I,
you sent an email
I,
reply, but you.
yeah, I haven't seen the reply. I realized you guys said that there was an open, but I haven't seen the response yet. I know you were waiting on something. I was under the impression that we were going to take the sort of the directory repo from the framework and then move it up to the top level. But it sounds like you guys are looking for something that's different than that.
Right. I'll just repeat what I said in the email. So my
Sorry.
understanding, you said you didn't see the reply, so
No, I
it's gonna be
haven't yet.
quick
Yeah,
then.
I'm sorry to make you repeat yourself.
It's fine. So I thought the agreement that we had like a while ago was before December and everything. Was that on the main page of the repo there should be like a list of references and a guide for the whole project and where you can find the spec, where you can find like APIs, where you can find diagnostics, stuff like that. Not the what it is right now, which is essentially the README for the C++ API, right?
No, this sounds logical to me.
Yeah, because initially, like a whole while ago, it was still the OCP diag, slash Meltan in that main README, and I removed it and put a to do to have this kind of content, and then the README got back. So anyway, yeah, the point is to have like sort of index or presentation on what's the project about and stuff like that. If you think we need to coordinate on that, then we probably can on a PR or something. Uh, it was an action item for Dylan last time. I'm not gonna necessarily continue with that if Dylan doesn't want to work on this. So we can collaborate on a PR or an email thread or whatever, so we get something that satisfies everyone's needs, right?
Sorry, I missed that. What was an action item for me?
The README for the main repo that you technically addressed it in the meantime, but it's not quite what we discussed like a while ago. So that was my comment in this email that we're talking about.
Okay. Not sure if I saw the email, but I will track it down.
I don't think Dylan was on that email actually.
I don't
Um,
think so
I
either.
think that was a miss. Yeah.
Okay,
All
sorry,
right.
my evolution client just picks random names when I send emails, and I made an OCP TV group on it. Anyway,
Nice.
sorry about that.
Yeah, since Dylan's doing like real valuable work, and I probably would have some input on this anyway. I don't mind taking it as an action item if we're just looking for content to kind of introduce the. I think there's some verbiage from some of the slides actually. I'd probably that we had worked on.
Yes, thanks for that, Dan. And I think the thing that isn't yet very clear to me right now is the referencing of diagnostics, because we will have like diags in under the OCP umbrella, but I think it's a good idea to reference outside diagnostics that we can vouch for as well, right? So other people writing diags based on the C++ API or Python API or whatever. We probably need a process to approve external repos to make it on this list. but in terms of people getting to the OCP dia core repo and seeing the index of stuff, it would be valuable to have external diags as well, right?
Yeah, agreed. I hope it becomes a big problem.
Okay. Um, right. Did we cover everything you are intending with this question, Vincent? Is there anything else?
I think there's the part of the onboarding deck, but that's not urgent. I think that's something we can iterate on a bit internally. In fact, I was going to give an intro to an internal team here, more high level, but I think a kind of how to start writing a diag is something that's quickly going to become very, very useful. I do think it intersects with the README, but once you have the Python native library, the kind of hello world in diag form will be also very helpful.
Yeah,
You can,
speaking of that, I agree with you, and I was wondering, because it is nice to sometimes have this slideware, right? Does it make sense to just PDF some of this stuff up and throw it in a docs folder in the repo?
it
I
does
would.
eventually, once it's, yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead,
No,
Adrian.
go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of very affirmative on that. I just don't think that the material is there. We need the library and the examples, but hopefully within the next 3-4 weeks we'll get that.
Yep. Plus one.
So we have two different aspects to your question, Vincent, and I'd like to make that clear. One is the selling pitch deck, whatever that I was asking about, and if you want to start on a draft on that, Vincent, that would be great. I saw you had a proposal in the email. And the second one is technical documentation regarding adoption. So like how to write a hello world, diag or whatever. That's like technical documentation. And we can have um, like a part of the README or whatever, a GitHub specific. I wouldn't necessarily use PDFs in my opinion, like rather use Markdown for that kind of stuff. PDFs are, more opaque and harder to diff on. But we need to deal with those in slightly different ways. But maybe we can actually reference technical documentation on the slide deck itself, on the pitch deck, as a quick start guide, right?
Well, just not to dwell on this one, Adrian, but with your clarification, I see Dan's point on. I mean, the pitch deck and the material presented at OCP have a ton of overlap. I mean, I'm very comfortable using the last OCP deck
Yeah,
as a pitch deck. I mean, it's
yeah,
like you
yeah.
can skip some slides. I mean, it's a pretty solid. I've extracted a few slides from that when I talk to people because I think there are 3 slides that really stand out. But the rest of the material is also equally as impactful. So I don't think I mean, we can trim it, but it's not a huge gain. I think the real win here is the tutorial sort of deck for how to onboard on actually writing a diag.
Right. So that was the main idea, right? Because we can start from the deck from the OCP summit, and my question was around uh, the fact that this pitching deck should have like the main aspects of the project
Mhm.
inside it, like first 5, 6, 7 slides, because we want to talk about the diags, the saving duplication codes, certifications, all of these kinds of benefits that you would gain from using this. Okay, I think we're clear on that. And we can, Vincent has an action item for this, so if you need anything, Vincent, just, ask and
Yep.
you shall receive. Right. Anything else, admin?
Um, I'm not sure if it's admin or technical. I'll see if there's any other admin topics, and then
Mhm.
The only thing I can think of is was there a call for paper made already for October for the summit?
Not yet.
It should be imminent, I would guess.
Probably around. I, then correct me if I'm wrong. I thought it was like usually April timeframe.
That was June, but April, June, somewhere around there.
Well, yeah, somewhere around that timeframe. It's much later in the year. June is
Oh,
when we actually have to submit. I think April usually people start prepping internally.
Okay. Well,
Is
in that case,
anyone
go
going for
ahead.
the proc summit here? I don't think so, right? Would be nice, but
All Google travel is now economy, so I'm not doing any voluntary travel.
Um, we have been asked to submit, so we did submit for Prague.
Are you sure? Are you sure you want that on the recording then?
Oops.
I think that'll be fine. But
Well, the policy is working, right? It's saving money.
Okay, so let's do a status if we're okay with admin stuff for now. I can quickly start. So I have a PR from Dylan for RFC1. I've reviewed the thing, Dylan. Sorry, it was a bit late, but it has some comments right now.
So I didn't actually make that PR. Chun Kai made that,
Uh,
but
yes. So there's two PRs. You are correct. There's two PRs. There's one from you and one with RFC1. I've gone through both of them.
cool. Yeah, I responded to the comments on mine
Okay, cool.
or
Thanks.
comment.
And apart from that, on my side, I am currently unable to do anything because of the legal blockage. So I will be waiting on standby until we get something in place.
Okay. But you've got a big queue of code all built up, ready to send over, right?
I have a queue of codes, yes.
Okay.
Big, it kind of depends
So that
on
kind of,
the.
I'm sorry, Adrian, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So that kind of goes into the topic that I wanted to discuss real quick. And unfortunately, I've also got to drop off here in a minute. We've got an all hands today I need to walk over to. One of the things that we've got is we're going and taking some of these diags. Like we need to show the value of the output format, right? Like otherwise, it's sort of like, oh, we had an FIO diag, right? But if we don't properly associate it with hardware, and we have always been able to get all those hardware IDs and things through, a big machine management layer that we had, which now we can't necessarily depend on. We've said, like, for instance, Redfish can be that, and it can, but then that means anything that runs our diag would need to have sort of an out of band Redfish compliant BMC with a fairly exhaustive feature list, right? I think it's okay for a lot of us because we're kind of embracing OpenBMC, which should have a common feature list if the NPI that you're working on supports that particular interface, whether it be PECI or whatever that is, right? Um, but I was thinking like for an FIO diag, maybe I would get the hardware in a way that would be consistent and work on just generally about any Linux operating system. Like maybe it's fdisk minus L or something like that, and I can get the serial numbers and the drive identifiers and whatnot, and kind of populate that info. I think as we get closer to releasing the SAT demo and the PCIe crawler demo and things, we probably really need to think about this. Like, what does that look like? What makes sense? Because it's gonna kind of set the precedent for what comes after it, right? Um, I don't know. My 2 cents. I've got a feeling we're gonna end up in sort of a like we were in the spec where we're kind of doing like an iterative review during this hour. It's not a bad thing, but I do think it's really important to get it right.
Would you say this is starting to get into the parameters discussion though? Because you essentially mentioned that we have different ways of identifying the hardware and not assuming that we have a BMC as something that we want. Uh, but like if I think of the FIO diag, getting inputs to the diag itself is kind of what the parameters is supposed to be, and inputs can be the fdisk or something that goes into fdisk and gives you the hardware.
Yeah, I was thinking more about the outputs actually. Like how do we populate the hardware info ID and things like that, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying as well.
okay.
So in order to get to the hardware info ID or components, hardware components, you you mentioned this fdisk mechanism rather than redfish PMC, right? But this in my head kind of relates to input parameters as well, because you want to tell the FIO what hardware to exercise.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I
So,
see your line of argument. That's fair. Absolutely.
okay. So maybe the point was maybe we should start discussing the input parameters and get to this point. Yes, Dylan.
I think this might be like a slight difference in definition. The way that we have broken up how our runner kind of works is like parameters are more or less just glorified, like a glorified JSON file. And then that there's some other features like default parameters and overrides and fun generate nice command line options, but it's pretty much just a JSON file. And then we have this like kind of hardware interface thing, which is what the piece that I think Dan is talking about, which is like some unified interface that has something behind it, whether it's FIO or whatever, and that's where the hardware information comes from. So in my mind, like parameters, you know, we basically just need something that converts between command line and JSON and vice versa. And, we could just create whatever for that. But like the question of like how to get standardized input like from the machine on like what hardware is on there is like maybe the bigger thing to focus on.
So I have a question for you, Dylan. In your mind, is the diagnostic doing the hardware discovery itself, or is it being pointed to specific hardware based on the parameters JSON?
In my mind, like an individual diagnostic is designed to like hard coded to run on a particular piece of hardware usually, or maybe like a particular type of hardware, and then it receives an input parameters to tell you which of that type, like which location, right? Like we design a CPU diag, and then maybe you're like, okay, I only want to run it on these two cores, so that would be an input parameter. Um, and then you would, from the hardware interface, get information on that CPU and yeah, that kind of thing.
Okay, so rather your question then is around defining what the identifier for the hardware components is, uh, rather than figuring out what exactly the components are.
I think it is, right? For everything that is a component, there is some way we will figure it out via VMC, via LSPCI, via, something on the slash proc or slash history. Like there's many ways to do it. We just need to come up with how do we name it. And then sort of the errata of how do we get that parameter into the diag, like, I don't think that'll be that hard for us to figure out, right? There's really only a couple different valid ways to do it, and they're all some form of key value thing, right?
Okay, perfect. So now we actually have a mechanism to deal with this. We have GitHub discussions. So if you want to go ahead and start the discussion on this, but I think we had the intro on the topic.
Yep, I think it's fair. And I think honestly, it'll be a far more fruitful discussion when we actually start getting some concrete diags where we're trying to solve the problem.
Right.
Yeah, disk are easy. Buses are a little bit more difficult to name sometimes.
Okay. Well, the GitHub discussion with with examples and stuff is going to be more tangible than the kind of discussion we have here.
Agreed.
Um, right. So we haven't finished the status thing. Dylan, do you have any updates you want to share?
Sure. Yeah, so I've been kind of plugging away on SAT. The approach that I've taken, which I feel like has been good is the first thing that I've done kind of after just like the initial cleanup and getting it set up in the new repo, is I'm basically going through and switching the command line options from the sort of homemade duct tape parsing to just use Absol, like the Absol libraries, which I think isn't, it cleans up the code a bit. It's not super necessary. What it is doing though is like I am basically I'm writing a new help for it, like one command line option at a time, so I understand what it's doing, and yeah, so go so I've been do it, look at one command line option, dig through the code, figure out what it's actually doing, because there's kind of all kinds of hidden logic, and there'll be like one or two words for help in the help thing for like what it's doing, and then pretty much like writing a paragraph on what it actually does. Yeah, so I kind of understand how the diag works, and it's getting like a little bit closer, so that's sort of the first step. So I'm most of the way done with that, and then I think I guess it's falling into logical chunks in my head that I think I can then divide into test steps, and I'll know how this fits into the OCP schema. Um, yeah. So I guess kind of the update is that I'm most of the way done with switching over the command line parameters, and I have been reading a lot of code and coming to understand how SAT works. And it's really cool. It does so much stuff. um, yeah, it's like eight tests in one.
It
But
is a cool test for your parameters. When you mentioned, Dylan, that you're using Absol, you're using the like what is it, the Absol flags libraries?
yeah,
Okay.
are there
Cool.
any things that you're worried about in Absol that you would rather I stay away from, Dan?
No, I think the only thing is like you're ahead of the rest of us, right, on this whole parameter thing, which is not a bad thing, and it'll probably help inform the discussion when we try to come back and standardize it. But I think the Absol flag library, as far as I remember it, they look like well, what I would call POSIX flags, although Alan corrected me that there is actually no such thing or standard, right? But like every program kind of does it that same way. I just don't know where that came from or if it even really is a standard or it's just a convention.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that this is informing, like, I'll probably write some duct. So, like, I need a way to take those command line flags and then switch them to JSON. Or, I don't know, I was talking through this with Kieran. It was like, we either need a way to ingest a JSON file, and then a way to kind of like generate command line flags for overrides. Yeah, it's just switching between command line flags and then like a JSON file of key value pairs to like output into the spec. So I think that that's what params looks like in its like simplest form.
Do you have an opinion on the whole hierarchical param thing that we have right now, or too early to say?
Hierarchical. Oh, I think that we should ditch it and just go with um, just go with straight up key value pairs. I think that works for almost every single diag. It doesn't work for like the big clunky ones like sensor monitor and error monitor, but they were always special. Like they're just not like every other diag and trying to fit the mold to them. We should have a way that can be like, okay, if you need more complicated input, here's the spot where you figure out how to take that in yourself. But I
Yeah,
think in general we should just support the key value pairs as like the
that
whole
is
point.
always the get out of jail free card. Here's the flag that points to the file where you configure it, right?
Right, right, right.
That's the metadata object, get out of jail card.
Totally.
Right.
But anyway, I do actually agree with Dylan. A flat structure for that can work just fine. And at the end of the day, even if it's a tree form, there are ways of flattening it to one single level.
Sabo,
Cool.
I forced you on Lynn briefly on mute, which makes me think you all had potential thoughts, but
Oh yeah.
I was trying to say the same thing. Like even for the complicated files, we can just use the keyword with the key. The value is a file path.
we
I I I want to make sure that we end up somewhere where we can override any limit, and it doesn't require the developer to have created an input value, hard coded an input value for that to work. And a key value pair doesn't seem like it lines up with that, but I could be wrong.
So I do think that they're sorry.
I'm gonna be quick, Dylan. So I'm just gonna say I think this is another candidate for a GitHub discussion, and then we can have actual examples and talk of them.
Yeah,
Please correct me if I'm wrong. So Dylan, we have escalate the comparator, the measurement comparator into the core library, right?
yeah. Or I mean, it's on the list as a feature. But no, that's what I was gonna say is that we probably need a special way to
Yeah.
like ingest limits that are being applied to measurements.
Yeah. So we can make it a flag if needed.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for the update, Dylan. I'm looking forward to seeing that diag work actually. And on that same topic, I realized that Dan's question hasn't actually been answered. Like, how do we actually show that the output spec is relevant and run some diags? And I was gonna ask, like, isn't this part of the discussion with Aaron with OSFCI to run showcase the diags? Like, does that work as an answer for you?
I think to show the value of the spec, it needs to be wrapped into a larger effort that leverages that data, which might be a reporting framework. It might be something from a company that we're working with right now called Quality Line. It might be some of the work that Giovanni and Richa are working on, something that kind
Okay.
of, right, like,
Okay,
okay,
I
we're doing all
I
this and it does this amazing thing because of it, right?
okay, I got it. I got your aspect. So we want to link this to business value.
Absolutely. Like I can run FIO now and it'll tell me the speed of all the read and writes and everything. And like that does have value, right? It's just now I have a wrapping function to make it useful, right?
Okay. So who do we need to talk to then to showcase something like that?
I think let's get the diags, and then we'll kind of tackle that one. If everyone's in agreement.
Okay, yeah. Let's
Yeah. I
let's
think
do
we
that.
may have a potential candidate with one of our accelerator programs we might be able to use. I'm still working on getting legal sign off on our side to do that.
Just
Cool.
as an aside, and this might not be connected, the CI, that OSFCI, we are using it extensively with our customers who are onboarding OpenBMC on HP gear. So there's that development. In fact, it's been pretty widely used by the early sales teams as well to demonstrate that it's all possible and all that. Just wanted to throw it out there.
No, that's awesome. And that's something where like a sensor monitor diag using that could be really, really impactful, right?
Okay. So I guess the answer for this is we will wait until we have some diags working and we'll resume that discussion then. I saw you got unmuted, Dylan, a second ago. You want to add something?
Not really relevant. Just before I forget, I wanted to say that I'll be out next week. But
Okay. Cool. Anything else we want to have in this last 15 minutes? Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. I've got a drop as well. Just wanted to say, hey, it's cool to see things actually coming along and getting real. So I think the two items that I'm going to take away is the DCO discussion. I'll kick that off and involve the relevant folks here, and then the final action items, just sort of the quick readme. And I'll put together something quick so we at least have something, and then we can kind of iterate that on the libraries and the repos and everything start to evolve.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye, guys.
In that case, I think we can close for today. Thanks, everyone.
see y'all.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.